"Hey, Jamie, I just wanted to let you know, like, you were selected as preseason All-American in all conference." I obviously got my accolades. I was Defensive Player of the Year. I was
Talk.
and we won the championship. And the one thing that I can say that the girls came to me afterwards and they were like, "We won this because of you, and we won this for you." And that's when I started crying because the entire season was so rough.
One, two, three, four.
Yo, I'm excited for today's conversation. Today gonna be a good one. This is my homie, Miss Jamie. We'll give her proper introduction in a bit. But I want to ask a question and kick off the conversation here because you said the last 2 weeks you've been going through it. What you been going through?
Yeah, let's talk
Uh,
about it.
I try not to get like too deep within the first minute of this conversation, but I feel like it's a lot of opportunity and answered prayers coming like all at me at once. And so I think I maybe mentioned this in a one-off, but in this new part of the life, in this new chapter of life that I'm in right now, I have been asking God to remove the barrier and allow ease to flow. So show me how easy life can be. Show me how easy I can live in abundance and love and light and opportunity. And God bent, and it's just like a whirlwind of things coming, and it's fantastic, but it's a lot that I just wasn't prepared for, and it's one of these things where it's getting me the visibility with my manager and my director and things like that at work that I'm asking for or that I've always wanted, but now it's the execution part, right? Like, I think it's one thing to ask for something, and there's another part to actually execute on it. And so right now, a lot of the work that I'm working on actually has the ability to affect the entire org and the entire sales org as is. And that requires a lot of documentation and just reading and meeting a lot of people. And so it's a lot of heavy pressure, but all things that I asked for, which is amazing. So that's just been the work side of things that's been super heavy is just coming correct, right? And actually executing on the things that you ask God to give you, which is opportunity, exposure, FaceTime, et cetera, and impact. And I think the other side of that is just DC is a whirlwind. I think I'm still adjusting to public transportation that's not reliable. I had a shit show of a Tuesday trying to get to work. The bus is not reliable. It's a little hot. It's a little groggy. Ubers are not reliable. You think they are, but they're not. So it's just a lot. And then I accidentally walked into Howard's Homecoming, which if any of you guys
Accidentally.
Accidentally.
Come on.
so
What
look,
happened
I
there?
live right off of Georgia Ave, which is where Howard is located. And
Oh,
so on
I
my walk
understood.
to my Starbucks, which Rylan knows I'm a huge stickler about daily, I walked straight in the tailgate. So I was like, I guess I'm outside this weekend. And I had a
Hold
blast.
up, hold up, hold up, hold up. I got
So
intel that you were also hosting a pregame as well. So how much did you walk into? Did you really walk
intel,
into this?
So I
intel.
did actually host my first DC pregame, and I was very excited about that. It went off without a hitch. That was planned. I will say Friday night was planned. There was like a Drake night. I'm like I love Drake, and it was so I pregamed at my house when we walked there because it was like a 5-minute walk. Tailgate and the actual all day Saturday where I was outside all day, I did not plan for that. So it was one of
Hmm.
those like Friday and Sunday were planned. Saturday outside was not. I'm just tired, that's all. But we out here, we thugging, we doing what these.
Got you. Obviously, when you get to a new city, you need some time to get settled in, get acclimated, peep out the scene. And typically, when you're single, you start to mingle. And so I did want to kick the conversation off here. We just got to take it there because this was a hot topic in our group
Out
chat.
here.
We need
Okay.
your thoughts.
You're
And
toxic. I just want to call that out. So go
no,
ahead.
no, don't be throwing that out
So
there.
so
Don't
look,
be
so look.
throwing that.
I don't know
Before
if y'all are
before
in that
before
safe
but
space for men. It's not safe.
real
I just want to let
real
y'all know it is
real,
not safe.
real quick, Brian, we gotta make sure that we give Jamie her proper introduction though. Before we hop into this, we gotta make sure we give Jamie her proper introduction.
You're right.
We,
You're
we,
right.
we, we can't just hop.
Before things get spicy.
Oh
Yeah, we
God.
can't just put you know what I'm saying. We can't just like this bringing people into the hot seat. You can't. You gotta look. So look, I'll start with me. Last time I saw you, Jamie, I believe it was at Upfront Ventures. I believe it was about a year ago. And it was you
Oh,
and Brian, I
rooftop.
believe. Yeah, the rooftop. Yes, and we had a lot of Black founders, and just we all got gathered together and just talked, networked, etc. Talk, exchange game, and and the interesting thing is that I think back to the first time I ever saw Jamie, and it was in high school. I saw Jamie, I remember you. And it's crazy because we met Brylan in Los Angeles because of the tech startups and all the things that were going on. And then when Brylan met you, we were like, wait, hold on. We 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 know Jamie. And it was dope to see somebody from where we're from focus on so much impact. When I'm looking at your like your LinkedIn and just like your professional profile, one is filled with experiences. Like, and I'm sure you have a ton you could talk about. What are some of the like the yeah? It seems like you're very impact focused. What drives you a little bit on that side?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think I don't want to say it's one of those things that's just it's in you, but I really do think that it was something that was just innately part of me. I've always been, I would say, started back in elementary school. I was always very interested in other cultures. I was in the multicultural class, Beachview, woo woo. And so
Oh, Beach View,
what multicultural class
William
was is that
Grace.
anytime there was someone that came from a different country, they would come into our school. And it was so funny that I didn't realize I was doing this, but I went back over to my parents' house top of the year we were moving, and they had all these documents that I was getting, like, congratulated and awarded by the state for starting these community programs or things at the school where there's like a welcome program that I started. And these were just things that I just completely forgot about. But I guess it was always an innate interest in what other people were doing in other people's cultures. And so I think that was part of the initial upbringing. I think from an impact perspective, where I was always very aware of is the community that was around me. And so my family, I played sports, obviously we'll get into
Yeah,
that. But getting me to volleyball practice was a group effort where my grandma had the deaconess at the church make meet
yeah,
her halfway to take me to practice. And like other people were always just pulling strings to make sure that I was okay. And I saw the ability of their sacrifice in me to then be as successful as I like to think that I am due to their willingness to help. And so I've always just been a huge proponent of you only go so far as people are willing to help and willing to participate with you. And I think that's
yeah,
just been a huge driver of the privilege that I have, the connections that I have, the community that I have, and without any of that, and someone being willing to know me for a couple of hours, or know my grandma, know my father, or know my mom, and do certain
yeah,
things on my behalf,
yeah.
it's been phenomenal. And so I think that's just been the bigger piece of it is I know that I have it, but there's plenty of those who don't. And so there's opportunity for me to connect or help those who are, not in positions that I'm always in or vice versa. I would love to do that. So I think that was just more or less lived experience in realizing the privilege and the opportunities that I was afforded and really just wanted to make sure that other people have the same.
Yeah,
Well,
so staying on that topic of, like, how your upbringing shaped you, yeah, we gotta talk about Meal to Thrill,
Oh
man.
my
Yo,
gosh.
pop. Mhm. And yeah, just can you share what it was like growing up as a coach's kid? Because obviously that's a unique experience, and just some of the pressures and rewards that came with that experience.
Yeah, no, it's super funny because I think you hear about certain stories. Well, I'll just speak for myself. I've always understood how great, I guess, my dad was at football and the impact that he left within the state of Michigan. You don't really see your parents in that way. Like, you don't see them as these big star-studded figures or these hometown heroes. And even I was in DC, or I'm in DC, but I was at the game this past weekend, sitting next to Lions fans, and we get to talking. They're from Farmington or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, oh, X, Y, and Z. They're like, oh, wait, is Mel the Thrill your dad? It's like, let this rusty man lie. Like his knees don't work, his shoulder out. But it's crazy to see the impact that my dad has had on the sport and other people who have followed in those footsteps. And so I guess getting to the question, growing up, I never really understood. He would go to like different restaurants and see his pictures around, and he would always get these awards every year from just different football institutions. Or so I was always aware of what space and lane he occupied. But when it came to me, it was just very disciplined. So it was like, you got practice, you got this, let's go work out, let's go do this. And if I'm hanging out, just chilling, watching TV, somebody else is doing X, Y, and Z working out right now. So there was always this piece of it where you just need to be working, right? And you need to be working towards something. And I was always just very sports oriented. I grew up very closely with my cousins, and they all went on to go play D1 ball. But it was just all that I knew. And then when I got to Harrison as an actual student, it was crazy because you walk in, and I feel like y'all remember this, but in the hallway going to the gym, there's literally like freaking shrine of my dad where his jersey sits, his pictures sit. And so
Mhm.
there was always this huge kind of, I guess, expectation from other people of what the Colemans were about because my cousin was there before. And so he played football. My dad was coaching there. And so there was always this thing of, oh, you're a Coleman kid. Okay, cool. We have certain expectations for you. And for me, I always thrived in the pressure and I feel like I always met them and exceeded them. But it would be different to talk to my cousin, my sister, and my other cousins who didn't necessarily have the same path that I had felt a lot of that pressure. I think it was much more pressure for me in not ruining the name, but then also living up to the expectation. Because even to this day, people be like, "Oh, y'all Coleman's just built. Y'all Coleman's just like." We were always expected to be smart and perform from a sports perspective. And to this day, even when I went off to college, my college coach literally called me a month ago. Was like, "What was your name?" And I was like, "Mill." And I don't know what was his name. And I was like, "Mill the Thrill. That's what it is." She calls me back. "Yep, my recruit's dad know who your dad is." Like, no. It's this thing where you really understand like legacy and how it really does live beyond you and beyond what you were able to do and how it still can be here 20 plus years later. And so I think that's also just been a part of going back into the impact piece of seeing how something that my dad did and lived in 1990s, that time frame is still showing up in 2023, where there's doors that are open for me, there are expectations that are set for me, and there are people that still my dad's name brings smiles to their faces. And so I think when you live in that kind of world, there's always this expectation that you want to do the same or you're not living up to the greatness or the hard work that someone has gone and laid before you, if that makes sense.
Did you ever feel any pressure to exceed the legacy that your dad led before you? Because sometimes, like, when you have a parent that's a really good athlete or really good at whatever field they're in, sometimes there's pressure on the child to live up to that, but also better than that, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that just doesn't happen. Case in point, Michael Jordan's son, none of them made it.
100%.
Right? So, yeah, did you feel any pressure to like supersede like the legacy your dad set for you?
Uh, Not really. I think I will say my dad did a fantastic job in separating him from us and even my brother who has his name, right? Like, and so I've always been very intrigued in watching my brother navigate the scene because it's like Milcom the third, like football, da da da. So he's much more related to it. It was actually really quick story. I have all these stories, but I went to my brother's senior night last 2 weeks ago, and the ref was like, "I know your dad taught you better than that. Back up," because he was, like, over the line. And so it was stuff like that. He's like, "Who's this ref?" And so he's literally asking me the entire time, "Who is this ref?" And I come to find out the ref also used to ref my dad's games. So I think he's much
Mm.
more connected to it, but I think for me to directly answer the question, I did feel the pressure in high school just to live up to the Coleman name. I don't necessarily think, like, what my dad said, but just the aura around the Coleman family. Because my grandfather he don't play. Like, it is very strict. Like, my cousin's friends will tell you, my granddaddy is a man to be scared of, right? Like, he is very strict, very diligent, very process oriented. And so that was much more, I think, of what shaped my identity in terms of what to live up to versus my dad, where I think my dad did a really good job in separating you are your own person. Your life is your life. What I did was separate to mine. And I also think, too, when you view it from a child to a parent, you don't really see the impact of what your parent is simply because you just know the real them. You see them every day and you weren't around in their glory days. So it's
Right.
some of the film, but that don't really mean nothing to me. So I did a great separation. It was only when we went out into the world and really just specifically Harrison and like within some confines of Michigan that you really felt it. But when I went to school in Alabama, I was like, meal the
Yeah. So jumping off of that, first of all, how did you end up in Alabama? Like, I noticed like you went to Alabama State University, which is a HBCU. I'm like an HBCU ambassador. I did not go to HBCU, but I'm a huge ambassador for
What made you
HBCUs.
go foreign?
I just didn't know what I know now. That's really what it comes down.
Same, bro.
My wife went to one. My sister-in-law went to one. So I'm like thrown into the deep end now. So I'm a huge supporter of HBCUs.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, were you intentional about going to a HBCU and how did you get into Alabama? Michigan to Alabama was like it's a big difference.
That's from literally the top north all the way down south.
Yeah, literally.
And had you told me I was going to Alabama, I would have said no. I actually did it on the day where you announced where you're committing, like committing day or whatever it's called in high school. And you commit, like when you have the whole conference and like presentation around where all the student athletes are going. I didn't tell anybody I was going to Alabama State. That's how much I was anti. I'm not going to the school. I don't want anybody to know where I'm going. Because it was really, to be very honest, and I just call it more God's hand pushing that one because I had an offer. I was committed to Virginia Commonwealth, and I thought that was where I was going. And then last minute, coach gets fired. Obviously, when you get fired, new coaches come in. They don't want those recruits. They want their recruits, right? So it all happened very last minute where I was like, what am I going to do? The backstory of how Alabama State even came into my career view was my stepmom was like, let's take you on an HBCU tour. No, and I straight up told her, like, "We from Detroit. I'm not trying to go to a HBCU. Like, I didn't had enough black in my life. The world's not, you buy into the like
Yeah.
the dogma of everything around you. The world's not like that. You can't operate in that space. You won't be able to do what you need to do. No." I ended up going to the Southern tour, like through my church, and we went to all of the Southern HBCUs. Got on Alabama State's campus. I'm not gonna hold y'all up. There was this fine boy in the cafeteria, and I said, "Oh, I like him. Like that's what they Stop being 1,000%. I was like, that's what they look like down here. Sign me up. And I also went to Alabama State, and that's when it was like Catfish Friday. So like the yard was camping, the Greeks were out, like catfish. Like, yeah, the DJ out, the men were fine. And when I
The
was doing the
cars and
local
all that.
store as well, as I had my highlight tape. So I was low key like thugging. So every time I went, I literally emailed all the coaches, like, I'll be on campus from this time at this day. Can I come by, introduce myself, and give you my highlight tape? So that was literally how I was getting myself recruited as I was on this tour. And long story short, I ended up falling in love with a couple different campuses. Fell in love with Spelman, FAMU was popping, Alabama State was popping, like Southern. I said, oh, I'm in Louisiana. Like it was, so I just fell in love with the essence and the culture of HBCUs. And so at the time, I still was like on the fence because I had verbally committed to BCU. So I'm like, no, that's where I'm going. And then when they pulled out, it just so happened like Alabama State was still on the table. And so I committed and went there. And so that's how I ended up down south. It was much more of a last minute cop out that ended up being one of the best divine interventions if I've ever had one in my life. So shout out to God on that one for having the coach fired and all the different things happen. But that was essentially how I ended up at Alabama State. And it was by far one of the best. I wouldn't call it a decision because there wasn't intent. It was a decision, but one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Mm.
It sounds like you had a lot of it sounds like one, you have angels and you have these in your journey, you've had these moments where things will happen and they'll go a certain way. But then you'll keep the discipline and keep an open mind too. Which and I think that opens you up to serendipitous moments.
That's a great
And
way to put it.
yeah, I think that opens you up to like serendipitous moments where you didn't necessarily plan for it to go a certain way, like leads in your favor. And that's and I think that's a very powerful thing to have that. And it also signals a sign of confidence too, because to be able to continue to go forward, because not there are some people that do struggle to have the faith in harder times, and especially when things don't go exactly how you plan, how it goes. And for you, how did you feel like you had an innate confidence, or just something that you built over time? But we definitely want. I didn't forget your comment about what got you there. What got you interested. We haven't forgot about that. It's like no, we gonna get that back around. But I'm curious about just confidence, and can you speak to that and how you built that? Because even like when you came on today, you're like, hey, look, I'm getting everything I asked for. I'm blessed. But that comes with challenges, and that's actually what before when we were preparing, we were thinking the same thing. There are new challenges. We're blessed, but because we have the things we asked for, we now have a new set of tests to come up with. So I'm curious. Yeah. How do you think about that?
That's a great question. I think part of that is my mom. My mom has always been like that. You better walk like you know you the shit. She's always been very much
Hold on, Miss Nikki walks like that too.
yeah, and all of a sudden you better act like you know who your mama and your daddy is. You heard that. And so I think that was like from a personality standpoint, my mom definitely always ensured that my self-esteem was high in that regard. And then I also just think that it's something that sports will do as well. Like for me, I was always playing with the older kids. I grew up a tomboy. When you were growing up a boy, you got to learn how to talk shit, defend your own, especially if you want to play foursquare or
Yeah,
horse.
100%.
You want to be
No, I go.
properly picked, right? Like the one thing you don't want to do is be picked last or not picked at all. And so I think I had this
Horrible
innate
feeling.
kind of, no, I'm about to hang with the dogs. Like we
Yeah.
outside. And I think growing up with all boy cousins, on top of that with my mom, it grew into this thing. And then when it came down to sport, I was always in the top sports teams. I was always getting picked first. And so those things also grow your confidence. And then when you
Mm.
happen to be able to do those things well, and then you begin to get recognized for those things, you start laughing with a little, you just start talking shit. And from that, there
Little
is a
little
lot.
little bounce to your step.
Yeah.
Little
And so
little
I
extra
do think that
bounce.
I was
Yeah.
in spaces that recognized me really early. And I do acknowledge that. Like I was recognized very early, whether I was or was not talented in something. And someone said, we want her. And even like
Mm.
volleyball, like how I came to start playing volleyball, I watched a movie, which is always crazy. That moments in my life come from me watching movies. Like me at Google came from a movie. Like me playing volleyball came from a movie. And so there was a movie, I forgot what it's called. If Sierra was in it, like it was some random low budget 2 week kind of film. But I watched it and I was like, that seems interesting. So my dad being him was like, let's put you in a camp. I went to a
Mm.
camp. I had a decent vertical and a coach pulled me aside and was like, I coached this club called Legacy. I think James should come try out. She would be great. Personally, I was trash. That was literally my first time taking a volleyball, but it was the fact that he's nah, like she looks like she's got it. Was on the top team from that point. And that was when I was 12. And then from that point on, it was just up. So it's been moments like that where even when I was
Mm.
developing with something, someone was like, there's something about her that I'm willing to invest in. So let's bring her to the front. So I think that's also has been a part of that where, yeah, I've just been in very great positions where I think my confidence with my ability to learn and then whatever the potential is that is seen in me from others have combined to be this person where I show up and whether or not I'm ready, we about to figure it out. And so, yeah, I think that has a lot to do with how I show up now at 28. But I can see looking back that there were just little fragments and things that kind of helped contribute from a personality to then develop the skill.
I'm
I wanna
I'm
point out
curious on that tip because, like you said, and ever since I met you, I've known you to be her. Yeah, like, just to keep it a stack, but those 3 things that you just hit on, having the confidence, having somebody see something in you before you saw it in yourself, being willing to continuously learn, like, that eventually got you to the place where you were recognized as an All-American, right? Which I feel like a lot of people don't even freaking know this about you. And I'm like, "Man, why would she lead with that?" That's just crazy on top of everything else that you've been able to achieve. And so I'm curious, can you share a pivotal moment from your volleyball career that helped shape you as a person?
Whew, how much time do we have? Let me tell you. Okay. I'll make this very short. The pivotal moment, there was two that I feel like to this day define even how I look at my relationship with God. The first one was when I was 16 years old. I had been playing, like I just said, I had been playing for the top volleyball team in the state of Michigan in my club. And there was two teams I used to go back and forth. It was Legacy and Michigan Elite. These are very important. So when I turned 16, obviously I stopped growing. I used to be in the front row and then 15, 16, everybody starts growing. I'm 5'6". I've been five since I was like 13. My teammates who were now my height are 6'4", 6'5", right? So everyone's starting to come into their height. And I'm like, something's wrong here. And I don't think I should be in the front. I need to switch position. And my coach at the time was like, no, you're getting recruited. Like you have a really good vertical. People like you in the front row. And I'm also left-handed. You need to stay in the front. I'm like, okay,
mm,
like I'm telling you. And I kept telling my parents and my coaches, I just don't think this is going to work. Come to find out, we come back around because every year you have to try out for the team. 17 comes around. I get cut. And that's when my friends start calling me, you make the team. And mind you, this has been the same team I've been rocking with since 13. My call didn't come. I'm like, no, hold on. Maybe they lost the number. I don't know what it is. This is crazy. I get a call maybe 4 hours later from the twos coach and was like, hey, such and such has a certain look for her team, i.e. height, because the girl I was competing with was 6'3". I'm not crazy. And she said, but I want you on my team. No, because I literally told you guys this entire season that this was gonna happen. This was literally gonna happen. And now it happens and no one is like seeming to see what the issue is. But one of the coaches from the Michigan Elite team who had been trying to recruit me for a while, like he was literally telling me, you have to switch positions. You have to switch positions. But me being the loyal person that I am, I'm like, no, they raised me. They coached me up. I'm going to stick with them. Called him up and he was like, no, you can come over here, but we're going to have to demote you to the threes team so we can put you in a new position so you can learn it and we'll figure it out from there.
Mm.
Ego boost, right? Like it's the ego death. Going from the top team to the threes team. The threes team, we just out here playing for fun and parents got money to spend. No one's actually about to go anywhere and play. So I'm like, I was mad about this twos team, but the threes team, I can't show my face, right? And so pretty much that entire season, I was a dog. Like I'm talking about, I was in the gym every single day. And one of the coaches actually coached at Lawrence Tech. And so when I wasn't in practice with them, I was at Lawrence Tech practicing to be a libero and a setter. It was really just a setter. And I was like, okay. And so grinding it out, grinding it out. 17th year was by far the worst year of my life. No one would come see me. Like, it was just crazy because our team was trash. We weren't even ranked. So literally imagine going from the top 5 team in the state of Michigan to we're not ranked. That's how
Mm.
bad it was. My 18-year rolls around. I'm balling that trial. Like, I'm talking about, I trying out for both squads. I got called back within 30 minutes. Hey, we want to offer you. I just came to see if and I just came to see if I could do it. And obviously I
Mm.
stayed with Michigan Elite, and our team, when we played Legacy, we beat their ass. But it was one of those lessons
You
of
had
like
to.
really learning to take several steps back to learn something new to then be able to propel forward. So it was only one season that was off, but I learned a lot about ego and the ability to take a step back just to be propelled back forward when you're learning a new skill, right? So that was pivot moment number one. Pivot moment number two came in college. And so my freshman year, I played, but I didn't start. My sophomore year, same exact thing, was playing, and I was getting majority of time, but it was me competing with 2 other girls, and one of them was a junior, one was a senior. So junior year, I come in camp, I'm balling. I'm literally like, boom, second week in the camp, crack my knee. Right.
Mm.
And at this point, it was crazy because I'm like, what happened? And this was also around the same time too that I personally started to come and develop my relationship with God. So I'm like, yo, and I had some personal stuff going on. Like, my mom was really sick. So there was just a lot that happened in that year where like my boyfriend broke up with me. My mom was sick with cancer, and I tore my knee up. But I just
Mm.
found God. So I'm over here. Are you punishing me? What happened? What did I do? I'm over here and I'm in church every week. I'm at Bible study. I'm at the foster home every week. What happened? And so that entire season, essentially, I was off, right? And so I'm rehabbing, which was painful. And all that to say, when I got into my senior year, here's the plot twist. I come back from my summer interning at Google, and I was just moving in. I was just moving into my dorm, and my coach pulls me aside. Hey, Jamie, I just wanted to let you know, like, you were selected as preseason All American and All Conference. And I was like, well, how? What stats are they pulling for that to even be the case? They're like, "We were going through everything, and we really feel like it's gonna be you." And I was really confused. I'm like, I just had a whole season out, but okay. And at that point, I was also concerned because I was the only senior on the team. I was the only player that had some playing time. Everyone else was coming fresh off the bench. And I just come off of a year long of an injury. So I'm like, these three factors don't make for a good senior season for me to even be in the running for these nominations. And long story short, I had a hell of a senior season where we ended up going undefeated. I obviously got my accolades. I was defensive player of the year. I was
Talk.
different, and we won the championship. And the one thing that I can say that the girls came to me afterwards and they were like, "We won this because of you, and we won this for you." And that's when I started crying because the entire season was so rough. And I
Mm.
saw myself not even practicing for me, but practicing for them. And it was like my coach had such a hands-off approach that season. And it was just wild. And I remember going to her office and I was just crying because I'm like, I'm not getting, and it was one of those things where you deviate like your own personal goals from what has to happen. And I remember crying in her office of, I'm not getting my reps in. And I'm concerned because I have things that I want to accomplish this senior year. And I feel like that's not going to happen because my rep time and my time at practice is going to teaching the girls. And that concerns me. And it was one of those things where that you begin to see, like, when you pour into other people, they go that much harder for you. And so for that to be the concern that I have, like, the first 2 months of the season to where the end when all these awards and things are coming and the girls are like, we won this for you. It's one of those where you begin to see, wow, there is moments when the only way that you can get your goals done is if you get to the goals of others and you train others and you help others. And so those would be the two, I
Mm.
think, pivotal points that I think still dictate and guide a lot of my life and the decisions that I make and how I think about my position and setbacks in life.
Man, that's a hell of a way to wrap up a career. With
Right?
the championship, the All American. Man, that's kudos to you and the team. That's what's up. That's what's
Thank
up.
you. Thank you. But I think there's also the last thing I'll say is there's times, and Rowan and I talk about this often, but there's times where you operate in strength and there's times where you operate in support. And I could say that year off where I was actually seeing the game from my coach's perspective, I think that is what allowed me to be that much more on it my senior year, where I always had a pretty high volleyball IQ, but watching it play out at that high of a level and you have nothing to do for a whole season but just watch film, see it from your coach's eyes and learn. I think that was where these things were just coming. And I was like, this I've never been able to just anticipate like this before, where then it went from support to strength, where now I'm balling and I can read everything across the board because I had a whole season just to study. And so I think that also is the bigger piece of like when you are in seasons of support as opposed to operating in pure strength, what are you actually doing to tee yourself up for when that season comes back around and it's your time to go? Can you really do what's necessary? And I think that's also the other pivotal point that I'll call out in off seasons aren't always off season.
Mm.
So jumping off of that, considering you were at the top of the hill, to say the least, right? Coming off of like your senior year of college, what are you thinking you're going to do next after that? Like you obviously go to Google and you were interning at Google, so you go and take a full-time role there. Were you intentional about going to Google, or did you know what you were going to do after you left college? Or yeah, where were you mentally after like being at the top of the mountain
I
after
was still
graduating?
riding that motherfucking wave. I tell you that. I rode that way for a while.
If you're with this,
But to be very honest, I did know where I was going. I was extremely intentional about Google. And yeah, I will say like my senior year, for the hell that I went through my junior year, my senior year was a breeze. Obviously, volleyball was the main focus, but when I had interned at Google, and so funny story on that, I watched the movie The Internship. And I was like, yeah, like Google low key look dope. Like I'm interested. I want to apply. And it's so
Mm.
crazy enough, one of my dad's coaches, his wife worked at Google. And so
Mm.
I had reached out to her, was like, I'm super interested in Google. And so we did a little like lunch and learn type of situation. And that was like my first introduction to Google, where she took me to the Ann Arbor office. I walked around. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I was a freshman in college at the time. So my sophomore year or my freshman year, I applied to the internship program and I had clicked her as my referral. Excuse me. And one of the recruiters reached out to me and she's like, hey, sweetie, you're extremely young. We need you to be a junior. You're only a freshman. However, you can apply to this program, which is for rising sophomores in college. I was like, okay. So I applied to a bold immersion program and it was a 10-day program at headquarters in Mountain View. Mind you, I'm crutching around or I'm getting pushed around in a wheelchair because my knee is tore up. This is how this all works,
Mm.
right? So I ended up going there for 10 days in a wheelchair. And what's crazy enough, when I got into the interview for my internship, the girl who had interviewed me remembered my pink brace. I had a pink brace. And she's like, you were the girl that was in the crutch or in the brace. I was like, that's me. So it worked out being like a memory thing. But no, so I was out there for 10 days. And then once you completed that program, you got fast tracked into the internship program. And so they didn't open up the internships for everyone else until December, but we had interviews in August. So it was very much like you get to pick these people and see them first. So I did the internship. I did the summer internship at Google, obviously between my senior junior and senior year. And then when I came back for my senior year, I had the Google offer in September. So I pretty much knew the entirety of my college. All I had to do was graduate, and it didn't really matter what I graduated because I had a job. So I was always
So
very.
you was really in your bag in your
I
senior
was
year.
in my. Let me
Like,
tell you,
And her experience was different.
yeah, everyone's like over here. I'm like, "Oh, what am I gonna do? I don't know. I still go to class. Like
yeah.
that was I was relieved to where I had my job offer in September. Season was over, and then in the
Yeah.
fall or
oh,
in the
I would have,
spring, I
yeah,
crossed.
you
I,
feeling good.
became a member of Designated Sorority Incorporated, which was phenomenal. I graduated, and then I went to Thailand for 3 weeks. Came back, and then I started at Google. So to answer that question, a very long story, I rode
Mm.
that wave for quite a while until I got to Google, and that's when my world scattered and you realize that you really have been openly Black in this world that you've been operating in for 4 years, even longer than if you want to
Ooh.
count in high school and things of that nature. And then you get into tech and you realize I'm a Black woman in tech coming from an HBCU. That is
Yes.
like a 0.03% reality, especially in 2017. And my world
But
shattered. And that's when it was like a quick and it just went
Mm.
like straight to hell very quickly. Yeah. So that was very hard to walk into that awakening of like how the world actually is versus the world that has been created for you essentially since.
for sure, and so one, it sounds at every step you have a level of proactiveness. Like
Yeah.
you're not just like flying. Yeah, you're not just flying around, landing where you land, and you're active. And you bring up something that we know, but you brought up something that's important to talk about, and being a Black woman in tech and coming from an HBCU and being looked at like slightly differently. Like
Yeah.
you said, like being openly Black and being proud and having all that, this being a space that was designed for you, and then going to the space that is definitely not designed for us. And then when you talk about the year 2017, I can't help but think about I think that might have been my first year going to Afrotech, I believe. And then
Okay.
the second year, it was 2018. And I remember Afrotech, the impact it had on me, because the thing is, it was interesting is that I was in tech at a young age, but nobody knew tech. You know what I'm saying? So
And you were
it
there
was
like before it even became a thing
yeah,
for you.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
yeah, so and nobody like and then me and Dre connected, and then we started a startup and all these things. And so we went through all these things, and we ended up realizing that we needed to go somewhere else for tech specifically. But I believe you met Brylan through Afrotech, right? Is that correct? Because Afrotech changed my life, right? Now, but the second year, I remember Bird, and I remember this huge opportunity. It's taking off. It's going crazy. Fastest growing company ever in Los Angeles. And I see what's going on, the hiring and how certain people are being looked at. And I say, Afrotech, we need something needs to be done. We need more of us here.
Yeah.
And so we ended up hosting an event that I was happy and proud to be there. But that ended up being the event where I met Brian. I met Brian during that time.
Protect you.
We met on the bath. We actually lucky met on the court.
We had met on
We
the
met on the
court, but
met on the
we
court
really
first.
connected at Afrotech.
Yeah, met on the court, connected at Afrotech. We ain't gonna speak about how the court went. You know what I'm saying? We ain't gonna talk about that. But it went very well for us. But look, speak. I would love for you to share more of your experience, because I remember the proudness of feeling like, okay, I've gotten these people to come here and see the talent, because I remember being on the interview panels and the differences in how they were looking at certain people from certain places, etc. So I'm curious to know from your end, like, how did that feel, and maybe elaborate a little bit more on that.
On app. Okay. Yeah. So I'm understanding your question correctly. You correct me if
Yeah.
I'm not. In a way, I will say Afrotech definitely altered the the course of my life.
Yeah.
I guess it brought me Brylan, and we besties for the resties. And so I will say yes. So no, I will say too, going to Afrotech, I had no expectation and no understanding of what it was. I just knew at the time it was labeled as like the biggest Black tech conference. That was all that it was sold in. And being at Google, we had like recruiting booths and things of that nature. And so that was more of a, I wonder what
Yeah.
this is. And in 2018 too, there was a little buzz of what it was, but I really didn't understand the gravity of it. And so I had just got to, I guess I just switched teams at Google. And thankfully I did, because the team I was on in Ann Arbor didn't have budget, but the team in Atlanta had budget. So I first got to the
Nice.
team. I asked my manager, I'm like, hey, can I go to this little conference? I don't know what it is. And she's like, sure, go. I go and I'm working like the little booth thing, and I'm gonna spare the very long story short. Just know I met Browlin and he had a bulletproof vest on. That's I thought so. That's all we're gonna
He's a
say.
trendsetter.
But honestly, and
Tastemaker.
Browlin in 2018 was a wild boy. Like I just think
No
about
problem.
this girl all the time, and I'm so happy to have bared witness to this man before us today. But I understand 2018
Yeah.
was long. Um,
Yeah. No,
I
trust
will
me.
also
Trust
say the
me.
bulletproof vest he was wearing was also at a pajama party. So I just want to also get a little bit
It's funny though, because
why I
so
was concerned that we all had on onesies and this man had on a bulletproof vest. But I digress on
see.
that one. We love him very dearly, but he was a special child. But either way, but I will say, like, being there, I think you see the beauty of what it is, right? And I think at that point too, it's still so early in tech, where some of the people that I've met that I still am very close with today were people that I met from Afrotech. And I think it's evolved over the years, obviously, where I think it was very interesting going in 2018, 2019, and being a participant of the experience. And
Yeah.
Brown and I went 2021 or 2022, I'm sorry. And we were on the other end of that, where we were also entrepreneurs who were hosting events and doing all these different things. And you get to see the
Yeah.
difference of it. And I think
Exactly.
now it's real crazy, because everyone that I run into always like that. The only thing they talk about is Afrotech. Are you going to Afrotech? Are you going to Afrotech? And I'm like, no. I personally think, like, right now for me, where I'm at in life, the only reason why I would be at Afrotech is if I'm speaking at a panel, or if I just want to see my friend. And I think the shift that has happened, that Afrotech has gone from being about, I guess, connecting people in tech to be in the spot that if you don't understand what tech is, you want an entry point into tech, like that's the place
Yeah,
to go. But I
I
feel
see
like
what you
for
mean.
us in tech, especially for us who actually are beginning to know a lot of people, the people that
Yeah,
we used to rock with probably don't attend anymore just because we cycled through it, or we're just
yeah,
deep in our
Mhm.
careers where we can get very connected to someone without having to go to Afrotech to do it. So I think if you're early in your career or you want to break into tech or you want to learn more about the space, Afrotech makes a lot of sense. But for me right now, I think as being back going from entrepreneur to employee, there is not really a reason for me to be at Afrotech. But it has evolved and changed, and it's not this
yeah,
300-person conference.
yeah,
It's now 10,000 people going. So I
yeah,
do think we have to learn how to go from catering to very specific people who understand why we're here
yeah.
to the mass audiences that now come to Afrotech.
For sure, because also like things like the pandemic changed the way that they do
Yes.
the events and everything, and I think that was the I had. It's interesting you bring up the two perspectives of going to it as an attendee and then being on the other side because that resonated with me because that was my experience. Like
Yeah.
it first starting off intending and seeing the impact and just being like, "This is crazy! Like I've never seen this many people that are Black that are interested in tech in one
Yeah.
spot." And I'm just like
Mhm.
a kid in a candy store, like going to every booth or whatever. And then the next year I get an opportunity to be on the other side. So I that resonated and I feel that. And I agree with like the as far as like the if you're early in your career, especially if you don't and you haven't seen Black people, it's important. Because when
Absolutely.
I brought these people, when I brought when we did the bird thing, I remember the look on everybody's faces when they saw all the talent. And that's all I needed.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. That's all I need. Like that's all I needed
Yeah.
is to see the look on their face, and they're just like, "Oh, this is like this. We like it. There's the pipeline and all that." And then afterwards, I got to do a little extra work, due diligence, make sure they follow up with everybody on the on those lists. But yeah, it's crazy because we're talking about serendipity, right? Earlier, I meet Brian on the me and Dre, I believe Dre was there too, I believe, that same day, right? Okay. Dre,
Yeah,
was we on the same team?
I don't even remember. I just remember, bro. I was thinking Brian and Malik because Malik was out there too. I'm
Yes.
like,
Yep.
bro, these.
Yes.
I'm like, these niggas have so much energy, bro.
They
I was
do.
exhausted. Like,
Yeah.
I just remember being
Yeah.
exhausted, bro. I was just
Yeah.
like, yo, where these niggas from? Because I'm tired as
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah. I remember that too. You know what's crazy though? I remember that too. I was like, it's taking so much to make sure that we get this win right. Like, yo, but we can't let it show because where we from, we can't do that. But
That Detroit pride.
yeah, we can't do it. We can't. Yeah, we
It's
can't let that
strong.
show.
Let me tell you. It's
We
strong.
couldn't
Okay.
we couldn't let it show.
Facts.
Yeah, but serendipity, right? We meet Brian on the basketball court, and later, like Brian said, Afrotech, we get closer, we see more, learn about each other more, stay connected. But then the full circle moment where I'm like, I like when Brian is starting a startup, and then mentions Jamie Coleman, and I'm like, that is a familiar name.
Mhm.
That is a familiar name. Now it's crazy because we did go to we come from the same place and the journeys are slightly different, but it still ended up crossing paths. Is that am I the only one on here that's intrigued by that? Like, how did that happen that way? Like, Brylan comes to us with Jamie from I felt, wait, how did we miss that? Like, how do we miss? We supposed to be like because we came out the gates doing startups and trying that. So were you interested in that before, or did you get interested in later, or was it the movie thing? Because you like
Look
the
at
story.
If I'm being so honest, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I like 10
I
toes
see.
down, stand on that. It was not in the plan. It was, and I would openly talked about it like before even Seventh Ave came into picture and into Prayer View. No, I don't want that. Like that, just because there was nothing in my heart that I felt like I was compelled enough that I would want to build. And even when I was in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be very honest. I was like a blind person just walking around. I started off in journalism. So the goal was I always been told you have a very nice radio voice. You would look great on camera. So that was just the angle that was more or less fed to me through opportunities, like mentors that would come in. Hey, can you come and do X, Y, and Z? And I remember I was in this internship. It was like a fellowship. It was called Emma Bowen. It was for Black people in media, and you were able to do it from your senior year in high school up until your senior year in college. And they would like essentially pay you and then match the scholarship funds and then give it to you. So it was a beautiful program that my friend had told me about. I got into it. And when I first went there, you're like the cream of the crop interns, for the lack of a better word. So wherever you want to go, like you get priority over the other people that they bring in. And so when I first got there, the lady was like, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do sales." 'Cause, like my dad was in sales, my mom was in sales. So I was like, "I want to do sales." And she was like, "Yeah, no, we're putting you in the newsroom." I don't want to, I just asked you to put me on the second floor in the news. I don't in the sales. I don't want to be in the news. She did not listen to me, and thank God she didn't. Again, serendipity and God divine intervention. Be like, she said this, ignore her, put her over here. And so I end up in the newsroom. I'm there for like maybe the first 2 weeks in the back typing up scripts. Obviously, all the different work. Like I have headphones in and I'm typing what they're saying as it is. So I forget what it's called, but that's what I was doing. I get a knock at the door and she's a reporter. Her name is Paula Tutman. She still may be on WDIV Channel 4. And she goes, "Jamie," I was like, "That's me." She goes, "Okay, you're with me." They gave me a personal reporter. I said, "What are we going to do?" And she was like, "You're going to," like I said, "I'm going to train you to be a reporter." I, out my mouth, told her, "I don't want to be a reporter." She goes, "That's great. I'm going to train you like you do. And after our training, if you don't want to, that's when but you're going to have the skills." Again, shout out to people ignoring me, because that literally changed, like forever changed the part of my life where I think after my sophomore year of college, I had an offer to go be a reporter in Texas. And when it came down to, okay, I can keep going back to the news station because I could do it all the way up until my senior year, that's when Google came about. And I was like, TV pay, tech pay. We gonna go try tech for a little bit. And I had literally made that summer what I had made in the 3.5 years of working at the news station. And so it really was one of those things where, if I'm being frank, it was just more of a money opportunity where I had no intent of going to tech. But again, I had watched the movie, I was intrigued, and then I followed the process. But up until that point, I was going to be a news reporter. And so that was part of it, but I will say those lessons have still stuck with me, where the way that I can find a story out of anything, the way that I can craft a conversation
Mm.
with anyone, the way that I look at things, those were all things that Paula taught me how to do. Training to be a reporter is you have to find a story in everything. And I remember us just walking down the street and she was like, "Make a story." And so I would just go up to the random guy who was sitting by smoking a cigarette, and we just started having a conversation. Next thing you know, he's like, "Oh, there's a festival 2 weeks or 2 blocks up." And so that's where I think my ability to make a story out of thin air has now approached how I do my newsletter, or how I participate with Seventh Ave, or the Talking Sales Piece about, is all from Paula. So thank God for that woman. But yeah, but I
Yeah.
think after serendipity to then how I got to tech was I watched the movie, got that. And then when both kind of paychecks came in and we had the opportunity to make the summer, or you can go back to the news station, I'm gonna go try that. And I did it. And I just happened to like what tech offered, but I had no intent on being in tech. And then as we progress into that, we get more and more into, at this point, I'm 4 years at Google. I was ready to leave. I was preparing for grad school. And then that's when I get a call from Brylan, and he is, "Yo, I got this idea." And I paid, and it's crazy because I waited on that call for literally a month.
Yeah, you
So you,
go tell this story because this was wild.
yes. Okay. So again, mind you, had no intent on wanting to be an entrepreneur. I was ready to, I was prepared to leave, again, prepping for grad school, was doing my applications, things of that nature. So Bradley calls me up and he's, "I got this idea." And at this point, we're just brainstorming. It wasn't the cookout. It wasn't anything of what it was, just like, "I got this idea," and we're brainstorming back and forth. After the second or third call, we end up talking. I get off the call like, "Hold on, I want to get involved with what he got going on. Like, this shit sound dope. Like, I'm curious." But something on my spirit was like, "Just wait," because I feel like I said I wanted Rylan to ask me because he saw value in me coming onto the team versus me asking. And I felt like if I asked, he would have said yes because of my relationship to him. And so it was one of those things where I waited patiently. So he calls again. We have 2, 3 more calls. And I'm like sitting on my hand, like, "Bro, ask me, please." Like, and I just felt God, like God was like, "No, do not ask." And so a month goes by. I kid you not, I get a text from him, and it has to be like at 9:30 PM or something like that. And he goes, "What if I ask you to be the CEO of Cookout?" And I literally responded back to him, "I've been waiting on this text message. Let's talk." And it was one of those things where that's how it happened. Like, it was one of those, I didn't seek it out. He called me and I was like, I became very intrigued with the opportunity. But again, I wanted it to be something where there was a value add that he saw in me versus me reaching out to him. And then through the course of that and my belief in Brian and the things that he built, it was like, okay, this is what we're doing. So even that, I think I walked into it very blindly, where it was like, I just want to be a part of it because it's what you're doing versus this is something that I genuinely want for myself. And then that became the bigger piece of how I then became an entrepreneur and went down this whole startup path. But that was never the intent of where I saw my life.
So I
Well,
want to stay on that because obviously it's actually crazy. Like I was definitely doing some reconnaissance, like all these calls. Because at this point, Jamie and I, one, we were already doing a podcast together. So that brought us very close together. And then two, like when I was living in Atlanta, I feel like I was seeing Jamie every single day. And so basically already knew how Jamie thought and went about things. And I'd be sitting here lying if I was not like, nah, you could just, once again, like you said, Rodney, she walked with a certain walk. Like, I was like, okay. And so I really respected like her business acumen. I'm not going to sit here and act like I knew or had all the answers. And so at that point, it was literally like me genuinely bouncing off ideas with her because we were pursuing a co-CEO model. And I was like, who is the best thought partner for this? And so long story short, we ended up not going with the co-CEO model, but we ended up bringing Jamie on, and Jamie came on as head of community and culture. And then, man, this was actually fun. We had a very heated conversation around this. I feel happy to go share that because I feel like these conversations never get talked about. But Jamie spoke up for herself and advocated and said, nah, I need to be running the business side of this. Like you can run the product, but once again, showing up exactly how I knew she could show up and as she should show up. And so I guess my question to you, Jamie, is like, how did your role evolve with like Seventh Ave, and what were some of the key like skills or insights you gained that you think are invaluable in your career now?
Okay, I will answer the second question first. I think the first question is a little bit longer. So I think across the board, what Seventh Ave and I think just walking away from the startup experience across the board, how it shows up today is I do advocate for myself. I think being at Google, you can get very caught up in the sauce of things and think you have a voice and think you're creating change when in reality they're just pacifying a lot of what you're doing. And you're helping them meet a quota and check a box that's needed at that time. Whereas being in your own startup, when you talk, things move, right? And when you make decisions, you see the impact of those immediately, and you have to be very clear on that. And so I do think my ability to advocate and be very clear and be very confident in who I am, and even the ability to land on my own sword. I may be very dead wrong in this, but I feel very good at what we're doing and I'll land on it in either direction. So I think that entirely is always, it's just a different way that I think I show up now 10 times better than that, where I said what I said, we're going to do this. And I have a voice and I care about that voice, which I didn't really understand. One, I think two, the ability to actually understand what really matters. Most things in life don't matter. And I think Brian says this all the time from this is a two-way decision. So we can make this and we can change it tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. And I think that's something where I used to be like, oh my God, the world's gonna crumble. This matters so much. And it's realistically, there are very few things that you can't walk back, right? Like kids, once they hear, well, decisions on even marriage partners or business decisions or deals or those are things that they can be sticky to get out of, but you can get out of it. And so I think that also has allowed me to be a lot more free in the decisions that I do make and saying, I have all the best information I can make. Let's do this. And if it doesn't work, let's just work around it and we'll figure out how to go from that. And then I think ego deaths. I am so humble. And I think it's one of those things where you begin to realize you really don't know. Some people have found success and it was just right time. Because even when people ask about the fundraising, like, how'd y'all raise so much? Right timing, right timing. Like there was literally like, I could not tell you the
incredible
synchronicity of that
timing.
moment. Like it was like,
Incredible
boom, boom, boom,
timing.
boom, boom. Doing that now
I'm
will not
watching
work,
this
right?
happen.
So it
Real
was one of
time, I'm
those
watching this.
things.
Hold up. This is
Real
crazy
time.
because Rodney, I'm literally taking early morning calls with Rodney, and Rodney is like coaching me up on like how to pitch. He is literally the one who was like, hey, no, this deck, you need to think of it as like, instead of it being data driven, it needs to tell a story. So shout out Rodney, because once again, if Rodney didn't have the time at that time, like in the morning, and literally the fundraising market, I'm gonna keep it sad. I don't know if we would have did that. So
I
yeah, gotta
appreciate
give
that.
you your flowers, King.
I appreciate that. That moment, that means a lot. That means a lot. And I want to also say something else too, is that something that Jamie, you said earlier, and I was thinking this in my mind as you were talking, you tell stories. You tell stories. You're a storyteller. And I was getting ready to say you're a good storyteller. But then you went and I started to see, oh, the journalism, the news, etc. And I started seeing,
Oh
oh, I
yeah,
see
no,
how this all like,
the ability to leave you with taglines is my thing.
She's
yeah,
called
But yeah,
yeah.
no, I think that was the bigger piece of it is, yeah, I think that. I think really that. And then the last thing I'll say about what I learned too was like getting with people who you can be brutally honest with. I think we often get in the
Mm,
spaces where people love to pacify you or they don't like to confront you or have the hard conversations. When I tell you, if you would listen in to the way that Rylan, Deandra, and myself are, the like way that we talk to each other, people be like, yo, this is intense. And we don't think second thoughts upon it. That's just where our relationship has gotten to this point where we have very raw, unfiltered, and like hard conversations and don't bat an eyelash about it. And I think like that is very important because that's the only way that the feedback loop gets to be that type where you then can be your best self. And I think that's one thing that I have honestly truly grown to appreciate about that process in the startup world is like you have nothing but your integrity within your business. Because if you say something's going to get done, there's probably 10 other people that are depending on that thing that you said you were going to do. And if you don't do it, then they can't do their job and then it slows up everything else. And so you tend to lean very heavy into very honest and hard conversation because that's the only way the business moves. And that's something that I've had to now figure out how to like make it a little bit feel a little bit better being back in corporate because people don't really like to be talked to that way. But my friends and I, we talk to each other that way. So that would be like I think the lessons that startup world has taught me being like in just a founder and co-host or CEO, whatever you want to call it, or COO, I'm sorry. But like I would say that was in space. I think going from head of community to COO was a bit of a trickier a bit of a trickier thing. I think a lot of it was like not really wanting to accept that this is what I needed to do. That was the hardest
mm,
part. I think me and Brian had a lot of different conversations where he essentially was like, the role is here, but you need to want it and step into it and own it. And I don't want it. That's the thing. I don't want it. But naturally, the way that I am, a lot of things were falling on me by default, right? Like I was stepping up and I was taking control and I was doing what I do best. I'm very efficient. One thing I've never had is time. So I'm very efficient with my time. Like so systems work very easy for me. Meetings work very easily for me. Communication works. So like things that require operational control, I do extremely well because it's one thing that I've always had to have on lock across the board. And so when I began to plan a lot of these projects and a lot of these community efforts and things of that nature, it became a thing where I got to Brown and Deandra, and I was like, I'm frustrated because I don't know what y'all are doing. I genuinely don't know what y'all are doing, given I'm doing everything. And there was a piece of it where I was like, and for the work that I'm doing, I'm not properly compensated. I don't have the proper title. And a lot of that really what rubbed me the wrong way about startup world was like your titles matter. Titles have never mattered to me. Either you do the work or you don't. But I don't really care what your title is. Where I saw when I was going into spaces, and I was like, "Oh, I'm the head of community and community and culture." They're like, "Oh, where's the co-founder?" And then they go find Brylan, and Brylan's like, "Go talk to Jamie." I don't want to talk to you now. And no one really understood that, like, I was running ship. Like, Brylan does this one thing, and Brylan is this person. But if you want to get things done and you want to get things like through the board, and really, I have Brylan's ear. So realistically, if I say no and he says yes, it's still a no. And I think that was the piece of it that people were not comprehending. And so I also brought that into the argument of I'm not properly respected externally to where they don't think that I have as much power as I do. I'm working far too much to have the equity that I have. And I'm also calling far too many shots to not be a C suite of some. And so that was what got us to one of our first very hard conversations because a lot of it was given that Deandra and I were the only women within the company, I didn't want to disrespect her role and I didn't want to disrespect how people saw her. And so I was always really treading the lane that I wanted to occupy and fully coming into that because there was no way I could do that and not step on her toes. And so there had to be a very hard conversation between us three of how are we going to all show up collectively, do all this together, and ensure that the culture of the company is not compromised because of our personal feelings towards what has to get done? And I think that was the first moment where we had that conversation. And the way that I view conversations moving forward, and this thing I'll say about it is, and I say this all the time, we're having this conversation not to end anything, but to figure out how to get through it. And I think that most times, even when it comes to relationships or co-founder relationships, friendships, we often get into these things of what you gonna do? Leave me? You gonna break up with me? You gonna do? And it's like when that's off the table, the conversation becomes that much more productive. And I think that was the thing I never feared with Rylan or Deandra is we're stuck in this together forever. Like regardless of whether or not it's Seventh Ave, it's cloud, it's this, it's that we're locked in. We're for lifers. So let's figure out how to get through this in a way that we can continue to be the best of people for each other. And that create a very productive work environment that I don't think people understand. Because most times it's, you can't talk to that person. You can't say that or they're going to leave. Where he going to go? Where's she going? They're not going nowhere. So we just gonna have to have a conversation, right? And so I do think
Yeah.
that's a very important piece where I can say I wouldn't have made it as far as I did in any of this without Rylan, Arthur, and DeAndre really being there and being like my people. And yeah, that's the last thing that I'll say is learning.
What I want to add this because I don't think I've ever shared this, especially publicly. But especially like supporting founders now. Always tell people there are a few decisions that I made that got me into the position I'm in now, which is like now I'm working at Northwest. Yes, it's a blessing. But I can tell you right now with pretty good confidence that if one, because these two decisions happened, we knew we needed to make these two decisions earlier at the top of 2022, because this is when that conversation happened that Jamie brought up, right? But that conversation actually had, I want to say, started either in November or December of 2021, right?
Mhm.
And it was around that time we were also considering like drastically pivoting our business from focusing like on live audio instead of just trying to beat a dead horse. Those are two decisions I can tell you right now. Me personally, I would have trusted my gut that one, the pivot that we made, that we eventually ended, the pivot that we knew we needed to make in November of 2021, we made July of 2022.
Which is crazy.
And the decision to put Jamie into that role, we knew we needed to make that in November of 2021. But that fully did not take over until, if we're going to be realistic, like February.
I would even
If
say
we're going to be,
April, 'cause I remember we were in Florida at Demon's house. We were playing basketball. And that's when Reed was like, when you gonna stop playing? Because
yep.
we were like, this been yours. So it was one of those things where the hard conversation happened in January, but then it wasn't like fully until April where I was like, okay, I'm ready.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. I can confidently tell you right now, if we would have made those decisions earlier, because the way our business drastically changed in that short period of time when we had Jamie starting to drive a lot of the business decisions. And obviously, I'm gonna keep it, I think I've been pretty transparent about this. We didn't manage money correctly, but Jamie got us right. Like, we were pretty efficient over the last few months. Imagine if that would have been extended out longer.
The last
And then,
thing I would say,
go ahead, Jamie.
I was gonna say, I just want y'all to understand how fucked this money was. Like, when I tell you, I don't know who was doing the back end numbers, but even like part of our decision to start, like, we need to figure out what we're gonna do, whether we're going to sell, go raise, or dissolve, was when I was like, hey, can we just, because even like listening to Arthur and Brownlee, they're like, no, we're good, we're good, we're good. We got X, Y, and Z, we got X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, let me just see the numbers real quick. Somebody's just telling me, like, check. We started running numbers. I said, we
Hold on. For context, Jamie is talking about literally this was a year ago. This was 1 year ago where we all huddled together and Jamie literally brought this information to us and was like, nah, it looked like we can't continue on. We need to consider selling. And I was like, nah, so go ahead, Jamie. People need context because this literally was a year ago.
So this time a year ago. I probably think this exact week. Like, this was when we realized we got one.
No, it was.
Like, it to a point. So part of my style is we like to do quarterly planning, right? And so this was like the second quarter where we were actively beginning to prep for Q4. And so at the time we were like, no, we have runway until April. Like, we're good, we're fine, X, Y, and Z. I'm like, okay, cool. Something just didn't feel right. So I'm like, let's see the number. Let's pull up the spreadsheet. Let's do this. Let's see the bank accounts. Let's enter all this stuff in. We get to calculating, and this is like what we're doing first in quarterly planning. So we're calculating that. I'm like, so if my calculations are correct, we literally have one more paycheck that we can pay ourselves, and then we can pay the rest of our team through Christmas. Where did y'all get April from? That was the conversation. And so it went from planning for Q4 to we have to figure out, are we going to sell, shut down, or fundraise? That was literally the conversation. And that took 2 weeks, right? But it was one of those things where I will say, I do think that had we, one, managed money better, and two, made the harder decisions sooner, we probably would have had a different turnout for Seventh Ave that was different than what it was. I will say that.
Wait. So Brian, how did that even happen? Because you the CEO, so I gotta ask you the question.
Yeah, yeah.
I gotta ask you the question. I understand Jamie's the CEO, so she
Yeah,
bears
yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
responsibility too. But you're leading the ship. How did you not know that she did not have that much cash? What were you doing to where you weren't focused on that?
So I was like, I was always heads down in like the product. Like I was living and dying by the product. I wasn't, yeah, to some extent, I did start to focus a lot more on like distribution. But once
Mm.
again, like we said, we just had made that decision in July that, hey, we're transitioning from trying to be like this live audio community based platform to no, we about to help creators put money in their pocket. And we knew I could still sit here and stand here today. That was the best decision. We knew we needed to make that decision literally
100%.
months before, but we didn't. And so literally from July when we made that decision to September when we were trying to get the product out, like me and Arthur and like our engineers, we were just like heads down on it. And so yeah, obviously at this time, me and DeAndre are still doing a lot of the fundraising stuff. I never, if I'm just going to be honest, from day one, I outsourced looking at the finances. I never looked at the finances until someone either said, hey, this is how much we spent this quarter, or Jamie comes and blows up your whole fucking world and is,
Yeah.
nah, we don't have till April. You got next week.
So
I will never forget that. Literally, like running numbers and be like, "Oh, we're good." Because at this point, too, I was wrapping up to head to Europe, so I'm like, "Oh, I got time. I got." So like everyone had planned, and then to literally have an hour worth of a meeting, and be like, "Actually, this is your last pay cycle." It's crazy. It's fucking crazy. I digress.
startups, so actually, what I want to do real quick for the audience is really put some like perspective here with some numbers here, so people understand like the scale we're talking about. Because the thing is that sometimes it's not clear. We're talking about venture backed startups here, and these are millions of dollars. I'm saying the payrolls here per month, can be as low as $20,000 to 100,000, as high as 100,000, 120,000, depending on the size of your team. And so those things, I just wanted to give that perspective of the type of numbers we're talking about here. And so that if anybody's listening to this and maybe in considering a startup and just understanding like payroll too, because that's a really big thing that's very difficult to grasp early on is payroll. And because really
Facts.
the cost of an employee is $10,000, $10,000. I'm not saying everybody's getting paid $100,000. I'm not saying that, but just in general, it keeps adding up. And you start to get that monthly cost, and then the numbers start getting a little blurry. Now, what I wish that I knew Jamie had this feeling, right? Because I remember being at Upfront, and I was talking to Brian. I was like, Brian, because I remember we had a little reverse, right? Because this is one interesting thing about startups that is that there are pros and cons to multiple different approaches, right? And a lot of founders, they want the cash up front. We want the big dollar, right? But sometimes what happens is that early on, if you have not managed that millions of dollars, and to no fault, who like you guys like, yo, how did you even get it? How did you even get the millions to manage? So let's like to no fault of your own, that starting off with a higher amount tends to sometimes change the way you look at the money. You know what I'm saying? Whereas when you don't like this, when a fund starts you off with a smaller amount, sometimes it's actually a blessing in disguise, because it teaches you as a founder a certain way of, because you can't delegate, you can't hire. So then now you're thinking about different things, and it gets interesting though. But I'm not gonna lie to you. Look, when I look at the winners, the multi-billionaires, etc., a lot of times, yeah, we look at the Zuck. You look at Zuck. You look at Evan Spiegel. You look at all those guys, right? And those, you got the wonder kids, but a lot of times you'll see serial entrepreneurship. And what I see is that literally, I'm realizing, like you said, this is just in the last year. This is not like 10 years. This was like a pretty, and it's interesting. And now we have, I don't know.
Hold on,
It's just
hold
an
on, hold
entry
on.
startup.
Hold on. The decision that we weren't going to be able to continue to move forward the way we were, that was a decision a year ago. But
Yeah.
we went through the whole acquisition phase, which is a whole
Yeah.
conversation
A whole
in
other one.
itself.
So then let's do this then. Let's do this then. One thing that's interesting Jamie, was that your newsletter, the corporate nomad, if I'm correct, the corporate nomad. Now, here's the thing, right? My inbox is trash. I have so much email I cannot catch. I'm beyond catching up. I'll never catch up. Now, I remember one day, and I got the email up right here. It was June. It was June 21st. So this was like a few months, like maybe some months ago, 4 months ago, not that long ago. And I just happened to just pop in my inbox. I don't know where it came from, and I just clicked it on. Like I popped it open, and you were talking about your traveling journey and the decision trees. Now, if we here's the thing. If we go into tons of stories, we'll be on here for 5 hours. You know what I'm saying? At the same time, though, that was something that caught my attention. Like you also have this corporate nomad newsletter, and you're really giving out like some free game there. The people, like the decision tree stuff. Like that was. Can you speak more to that?
The decision tree itself or referring to corporate nomad?
Look,
Like that, how okay. You said
it can be high, like it can be both if you want. The corporate nomad itself. And look, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how you got me on. I don't remember. I don't know how I got on the list, but I'm on the list. I'm on the list, and but that is good to have that type of. It's like an influence because you're sending out your experiences. You're sharing them with other people. Like what? Yeah, what is that experience like with that in the newsletter and sharing your experiences? And you don't have to get into the details of the decision tree if you don't want
yeah.
to, but that was the email that caught my attention because you were talking about traveling, and I know you also came back early from your traveling trip too.
Yeah. No, I love the corporate nomad is my baby. It's something that I've been playing around with. Again, I love telling stories. I've always been a writer, but this is more or less my way of channeling all of the different things that I was learning and experiencing. And then the corporate nomad had evolved. At one point, it was called Culture Therapy, which is a company that I own. And I started writing that, I want to say like back in 2018. And then I went on a break and evolved it. And then after we shut down Seventh Ave, I became this nomad, right? Like I literally sold all my stuff, put the rest of it in storage. And I was like, I'm just going to go. I wrote in my most recent newsletter when I realized people were shutting down the company. I literally said it was one of those, do you want to cry in the Phantom or that Nissan? And it was like, I'm going to go cry in Europe as opposed to my coach in Atlanta. We're going to go
Yeah,
cry. Bitch. So that was more or less like how the newsletter was birthed, where I felt like God was giving me this journey, but you have to document it. And honestly, I did not think it would resonate with that many people. It was much more like I'm writing for my own reference. And then if you happen to enjoy it and like it, then that's great. And I can say that like anytime I release the newsletter, like I'm at least getting 14 to 15,000 people reading it. And that is crazy to me. I still can't comprehend that because it's very much me just sharing stories, but it seems like it's sticking and people really enjoy it. And so for that, I'm forever grateful for everyone who reads it. To get
I
into the
read it.
decision tree. Thank you. To get into the decision tree, it really stemmed from the fact that I felt like Europe was a really huge mirror for me. I think it was the first time where it was like I'm connected to nothing that I know and I only have myself. And that's the one consistent thing that's traveling with me through all these different countries. And so you learn a lot about yourself. And what I have realized was that although information that I was gathering was changing the way that I was viewing things, the decisions that I made still didn't change with the new information. And so what you end up having is you're birthing out these leaves and this fruit, and most of it is not fruit that you actually want to bear, but you never pivoted when something changed, like when you got new information. And so for me, what I had realized and what I was talking about in the news article was, or the newsletter, was that I was making a lot of decisions off of old understandings of myself. And so the ability to say, I used to want this thing and I used to go out and I used to do this and I used to do that. When realistically, that's not what I want right now, but it's what I used to want. And so if I used to want it, then I'll make decisions around that. And it wasn't the case. And prime example of that was like even the startup that Rylan and myself and one of our friends had started again. I realized soon after that, I personally didn't want to be a founder, like, at this point in time. Like, it was like, no, it was a great way to start off and make money for where I was at and to really figure out how to keep myself busy. But the reality is I didn't want that for myself. And the closing of Seventh Ave showed me I didn't want that. But it was like, but I wanted the founder title and I wanted what came with it. And I liked the idea and I liked the idea of building with Rylan. Like, I had a great time with doing that. So let's do that. And so the decision that I did was like, okay, if I'm going to do that, Then that means I need to find stability, which means I need to go home, which means I need to do. And so all these different things came about from that. And realizing that one decision that I had made a while back, which I was, yeah, let's just do it. It then like rerouted everything that I actually had planned for myself when the reality was I never wanted that. When I didn't take the new information, apply it, and then say, okay, you don't want this. So if it comes your way, say no. And then you can move around it. And so the default of if I'm going to build a company, I need to go home. I need to get a job. I need this. I need that. And so what I realized was that I ended up coming home early from Europe to go do this thing that I'm now no longer doing. And then the crazy part of it is when the Google job offer came and I'm now looked between the thing that I was supposed to pay my bills and the thing that is actually paying my bills. I didn't like it's hard to keep showing up in this. And but when you know something is not for you and you have new information, how much longer are you going to keep trying to keep this thing alive instead of pivoting to what works? And so that was really where the decision tree was stemming from was don't allow old things that you used to think that you wanted to actually influence things that you know to be true about yourself right now. And so really when you bear fruit, is it fruit that you actively are aware of, or are there things that like they are happened by circumstances, if that makes sense. So that was more where that was coming, where all these kind of epiphanies were hitting me at once, where it was like, no, when you know new information, you have to prune the tree and sometimes just kill it all together and plant something new and understand that there's going to take time for these things to grow. But there's also secondary consequences of it, where I didn't think in saying yes to the business meant cutting my trip short. I didn't think about that. I was like, no, I need money. I like the idea. Let's do it. When realistically, I knew I wanted to be in Europe. I knew I didn't want to do the business. Well, by default, I'm now cutting things I actually want to do because of this thing that I thought I wanted from 6 months ago. So that
Yeah.
was more or less the essence of the learning is be very aware of the side kind of decision or the secondary consequences that come with a choice that you may or may not make. But yeah, that was what that was about. And it's a very still very true statement of life and understanding you say
I,
yes to
I
this, what and other things are you saying yes to as well?
I love the transparency around startups, and also even in Brylan, you two, and even this proud of both of you. Just have to say 100%, like without a doubt, even like the stories around the trust you guys had to be able to have those hard conversations. Me and Dre go back to when we were 19, 20 years old. I like we were we had the back and forth. We had the hard conversations too.
Yeah.
And I remember that. And at some point you realize that we are in this. And then, but yeah, we had to make a pivot, of course. I'm big on those, but yeah, the startup journey is cool. But it's not, look, it's not everything. And there's also other things to do. And the decision tree resonated with me probably because of the same things that you're talking about, which is like, when we ended our startup in Michigan, there was some time when I went to corporate. I went to work for Ford and I just was there. And I knew California was the next seed to plant. And then like things spiraled from there. And so things are coming full circle. So I think that is letting us know that we're all on the right path here. And we're all on the right path here. But I think, Brylan, I think what is it that what do you think is the biggest thing that you would say as far as going forward after like startup life and then like to where you guys are at now? 'Cause you guys still like we're on the podcast together. You guys still work together. You're great friends and stuff like that. So it's an amazing thing to see. And you guys started off the podcast, I could tell, with a certain level of energy and friendliness, and it's dope to see. Seriously.
Was that a question for me or Jamie?
It was a question for you, Brylan.
I'm gonna keep it a sec. Like Jamie has been saying throughout this, like we can't give her to each other. I genuinely believe that's impossible. Not like damn near impossible. No, it is impossible. Like in capital words. And I think, yeah, I honestly, I think where we have gotten in our like relationship today, it is, I personally think it's all because of Jamie. If it wasn't because Jamie came up to me and was like the whole Afrotech story, but even furthermore, like it wasn't like we stayed in contact after Afrotech. It was serendipitous. Like I just happened to post on Instagram that I lived in Atlanta and Jamie DM'd me and was like, oh, you trying to do a podcast episode? The podcast episode turned into a crazy car ride that night at JR Cricket, swear to God. And then it turned into, oh, you want to be the co-host? Then it turned into, let's go get wings at Hyatt. Then it turned into us just brainstorming like different ideas. Like, and so it's evolved and taken many shapes and forms, but it's done what it needed to do. And I think, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I can be very stubborn, and I'm glad Jamie didn't say anything about that today on pause, but I'm gonna go
No,
ahead.
we
I can be
no,
I can be
look,
extremely stubborn, and we
look,
we
so
butted heads. So
Jamie has to get the flowers for crunching the numbers and then coming to you because I remember this one moment. I was at a friend. And I had a measly 100,000 at the time. I had a measly 100,000, and I remember thinking, I have to think. I'm thinking hard as hell about just what like I'm paying an engineer. It's $200,000 a year. We got $100,000. I'm like, we like I'm really looking at every dollar. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, Rylan, like, how are you thinking about like runway, et cetera? He's like, man, I'm good. We good.
I think this is a very important thing to understand as well. And this is for whoever is listening. And I think moving forward, it is very important to understand one, how an individual person looks at money, but then two, the individual person's risk tolerance. Like that is something where I did not realize it until me and Brylan to a point, and and I do say this as well, Brylan is extremely stubborn. And I'm going to call you out right now. Like he literally bothers the shit out of me. Like like his devil advocacy just to play devil's advocate is like you don't even care. You don't believe in this. But he like just to see how much you could believe, like, how much you're serious about your idea, he's going to take it to hell and back. And that's why that was not necessary, right? And I think I have not I think I have learned Brian enough to know when he's being combative and when he's actually in the space to listen. So where there'll be certain conversations where I'm like, I'm gonna just let you talk and we can talk in 3 days when you feel better because we're not gonna be productive right now. Like that and it's that level of I think learning. But I will say when we were closing down the business and we were like, okay, so what is next for everyone? And like where is everyone thinking about this? The way that he thinks about money and the way that he assesses risk is completely different than how I look at risk and how I assess money. To where had we had these conversations prior, I would have known never to put the money in his name. Like Brian don't need to see shit. Like just let him go bill and I'll handle it over here and tell him when he's had enough because otherwise like the way that he thinks about money is ever flowing. Like I'm covered, God got me, he'll come when I need it. That's not how certain shit work, Brian. Like I get that's how you operate, and that's how like you do it. Like you gonna have us out with a couch and a toothbrush. Like we can't do that. And
I don't that's that Silicon Valley thinking.
tell you, I've been without. I'm good. Okay, we got 6 people with
Yeah.
kids. Like you can't do
Yeah.
that. But that was not. I wasn't understanding of that. And even like when we were I was trying to get through to him of no, that doesn't work. There was a point where no, how he lives, and how I live, and how I live. And my dad is also now Miller Thrills a financial advisor. So we don't play that over here. Like we got everything set up. We got a person that handles that. Where Brian's, I'll run it up because I know I can get it back. That's great. But we have other factors going on. Like can't just be aware of that and just operate and maximize for that. That does not work. And so that's when I was
You got to know your strengths and
yes,
weaknesses.
and he ain't touching that damn checkbook this way. So that's where I see it as also as a founder and just even like who you're getting into bed with is what is their risk tolerance? And if shit goes to like how much are they betting on themselves? Because I was in the boat where I'm like, listen, if I can go get a job and this job covers this and then I can give the rest of this, let's do that. We don't have to just be without a job for 7 months. Like we can get a job and work to build. And even now I'm betting on myself for 6 months. Why, if we, and I'm like, walk me through this. If you can go get a job for $150,000, you're telling me you would rather be broke with credit card debt and work full, like be by and
You're
just
right.
like be full on $0 when I have all my time versus bills paid and have some time to build and then go back full. Yeah, I'm betting on
Yeah.
myself. I'm never going back to work.
Yeah.
But that's him, and I love him for it, like, I really do, but it just wasn't me, and so I think knowing that and, like, now understanding the way that he looks at money and I look at money, we're always going with the person that reserves the fund versus the person that says, "We got another day to ball out." So, that was also something that I think was a huge factor, and then the last thing that I'll say, which is different from money, but I think how serendipity flows is being obedient to assignment. I will say that 10 toes down, where I think even that evolution of Brian and I's relationship is Granted, he had on a bulletproof vest, but it was like something that me was like, ask him about it. And then even after that point, we didn't stay connected to this point. We didn't talk. But then when something around me came around the podcast, like something in my spirit was like, start a podcast. And the only conversation that Brian and I had had outside of Afrotech was I posted something and he wrote some super long response back, but it was super thoughtful. And I'm like, wow, who was a guy in Atlanta that is close that that I've had thoughtful conversations with? And he came to mind. And prior to him even coming, my goal was to make him the co-host. I was like, okay, it's me, my homegirl Chris. We need a man, and I think I want Brylan. And then when Brylan came and the conversation we had flowed so effortlessly, it was just a matter of, okay, how are we gonna get him on board? And then when he was like, I'm trying to be a co-host, hey, the part's yours because I knew I wanted him. But it was a piece of it where our relationship would have never formed what it was all those years ago had I not been obedient, right? And so that's where I say like those feelings that you have to act on something, regardless of how big or how crazy it is or how small it is, do it because you don't know what comes from it. And yeah, all that to say, I think we are here today, at least Brian and I, and the journey that we've been on is literally due to obedience on both parts.
Said, well
Incredible.
said. Let's wrap it up on this last question. Looking forward, we spent a lot of time like reflecting and like highlighting like lessons. Let's look forward a little bit. Finish the sentence, Jamie. And in 10 years, Jamie will be
Operating in full flow.
With the quickness, no hesitation.
No,
No hesitation.
I'm about flow and ease right now. And I think again, these last 2 months that I've just been in DC in particular and praying that prayer of like, show me how easy life can be. Life is very, obviously there are the ups and downs, but there is a flow to life where if you just let go and the rope's not burning your hands, the rope is going to fall anyway, right? Like you trying to just hold it, it's going to burn your hands in the process and it's still going to get to the end result. And so I think that this prayer that I've been praying, the way that DC has been allowing me to move, there is such an ease and flow in my life where I'm like, okay. And I think that if I'm able to continue this on in 10 years, I operate in full flow. It is as may come as they don't, but everything that I need comes in time. And I am a firm believer of that. So I'll be in full on flow.
That's beautiful. Thank you for your time, Jamie. We really appreciate it. You've been super gracious. You dropped a lot of gems. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Brian, I don't know, Brian, you have anything else
Yeah. Where can people, if you want, where can people find you? Find you? Is there Instagram? I don't know, just the newsletter. Is there any other things that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think my LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter is JM Coleman 3, very consistent, but definitely the corporate nomad. I'm not as active on social media as I used to be, but for life update, the corporate nomad on Substack is definitely the way to get inside my head. Yeah, that would be my
Nice,
preference on things.
nice, nice, nice. All right.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully this
Cool.
was
We appreciate you,
Yeah.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate y'all. And this is super dope with what you're building and sharing. I know we didn't necessarily get into all things tech. It seemed much more about my life, but I appreciate it all the same.
No, we'll just have to have you back on. That's all. It's not a one-time thing.
We have a
You have to
lot
have it.
more to talk about.
Yeah.
It's like my mind. I'm like, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Well, I'm
It's
totally
incredible
gonna
though.
kick it off with the we're not to take your woman on a date because I had thoughts. I was
Okay.
like, oh, we come
Okay.
in. I got
Do we have a minute or two? Do we have a minute?
I don't think are we still recording or is this over?
No, we're recording right
We're
now.
recording. We're still going. We're still going.
Byron, are you good on time? You good on time, bro?
I am not a good on time.
Where you gotta
Okay.
go?
Okay.
We'll do it for part.
Today's
we'll,
Lena's birthday.
We'll save it for part 2.
Oh, okay, yeah, we'll do a part 2. Well, we definitely got to get your opinion on that for sure.
Tell her I
So
said
we'll
happy
wrap it up.
birthday
We'll wrap it
too.
up.
Yeah, tell her it's a happy birthday. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, y'all. I'll see you next time.
Bye.
1, 2,